Hey everyone, and welcome to Ghosted But Make It Gay, the 18 plus podcast where things get creepy, chaotic, and just a little unhinged. I'm your host, Juno, and every week I dive into paranormal encounters, unsolved mysteries, myths, legends, and even cursed internet finds, trying to figure out if it's actually haunted or if we're all just delusional. Either way, don't expect a straight explanation. Hello, lovelies. Welcome back. Welcome back, old listeners, and welcome in new listeners. This is Ghosted But Make It Gay, and I'm your host, Juno. And we all love spooky stuff here. So if that's what brought you here, then you're in the right place. If you don't know what the podcast is about, we go over folklore, myths, legends, haunted stuff, and a bunch of other unsolved mysteries and cursed things that we find online to prove, are we just delusional or are we actually seeing what's there? So before we get into it, a little life update. How you doing? My name's Juno. My pronouns are he, they. And I have been trying to get this math course done that I'm doing, and I just do not have the motivation. But I will record podcast episodes every day of my life. So if you want to help me avoid doing my math class, like, share, comment, follow this podcast. That would help me out. But yeah, I was actually cleaning out the tank to my snakes like terrarium and stuff earlier before I started recording this episode, and that bitch was trying to bite me. I don't even know. I was like, girl, you need to get the fuck back because I know you're hungry, but you're also dirty. Like, the fuck? So that was my day so far. Right now, I am just sitting here. I forgot to grab a Monster for my caffeine, and I'm getting a little hungry. So we're going to get right into this episode so that I can eat, maybe flirt with hot men online, and see what happens. Anyone else? Cool. Well, this episode, I have a little special guest that you guys won't be able to hear talking. And she's not like really here with me, but she is my haunted doll. Last episode, if you listened to it, we talked about the Fae. Did a really broad overview of the Fae and some folklore with that, which already felt like a bad idea. The Fae are always listening, right? But this time, we're bringing the problem home. That's right. Today, we're talking about haunted objects. And like I just said, my haunted doll I have here, Ailish, is here on standby. So let's get right into the episode. So my haunted doll that I got, I actually had bought through Etsy from a lady, I can't remember, that actually sells haunted dolls to find caretakers for them and the spirits that are attached, or partner them up in a way that makes sense to the people that are purchasing the dolls, right? They go through like a whole 6-month process when they find a doll to see if it's haunted, to see if there's any entity or spirit attached to it, any paranormal activity that they can prove with it before actually pairing them up with someone. And my haunted doll, Ailish, that I have is actually from there. Long time ago, not a long time ago, it was probably 2017, 2016, maybe 2018, 2019. I can't remember. It was before I moved to where I'm living now, when I was living back with my dad, and all my friends were living in the same area around my old high school. I ended up getting a haunted doll. This is like when I was like at the peak, like learning phases and wanting to dive into my witchcraft practices and my spirituality and everything. For those of you who don't know, I practice like Celtic paganism. I'm an eclectic witch. I also dabble in a lot of other pantheons when it comes to that, but I practice a little bit of everything. I specialize in hexes and curses and empathic readings. So, yay. But I was like, wow, I really want to be haunted. And if you listen to my first episode, I believe I mentioned it in there, that I want to be haunted. I really want like poltergeist level hardcore activity happening around me, to have the proof, to have that experience. And I've like ran into and have had paranormal experiences that we'll talk about as I do more episodes, but I've never had something like thrown at me, right? Or something like absolutely wild that you like read stories about or see like TikTok posts about, or like the grainy videos that you can barely make out like what's going on. Like I want that level of haunting. At this point I'm just like trying to make my wherever I live a nexus point for like spirits. Like I don't even know. Maybe it's the loneliness. Maybe one of the demons or spirits will be like a really hot guy that like died in the war and he just like needs some company. Who knows? Who knows? Anyways, but I had messaged into this Etsy dealer for a haunted doll. And I had asked her, I was like, hey, do you have any haunted dolls that would pair up well as a spiritual companion? Not something that is mischievous or anything, but I'm looking for something that helps energy wise, positive energy in my home that can also, whatever the spirit identifies as, that can also, be an entity or spiritual companion for me to talk to, that is just like there passively, that I can tie into my everyday, spiritual work and witchcraft, that they could help out, things like that. And this lady, I believe it was a woman that's running the shop. Can't remember the name of the shop. I think it's like Cat's Creations or something along those lines. I'm sure if you like look up haunted doll seller on Etsy, you'll find her if she's still like in business. But I told her a little bit like about myself being like LGBT. I told her, that like I didn't tell her a lot of details. I told her, I just like practice like witchcraft, that I'm still young in my practices and all this stuff. But she didn't like really know anything about me. She didn't know, one, that I was Irish or Scottish. She didn't know that I was leaning towards Celtic practices. She also didn't know that I was specifically looking to try to get like a feminine entity in spirit as well. And that led her into one, sending me a biography, like a bio that she had written up based off of her conversations and practices with this entity um, named Eilish or Eilish. It's spelled Eilish. I believe it's pronounced Eilish. Um, in with a Irish, pronunciation. And I've never gotten the pronunciation right, and I've always used it interchangeably, Eilish or Eilish. But she's never had an issue with that I felt, so it's fine. But she sent me this, bio for Eilish, saying that she used to be a practicing witch, that she was a grey witch in Ireland, that she had, when she had passed away, she had attached herself to this doll. And then another grey witch took her in, and for the longest time, this grey witch had her, and then sent her overseas to be in the care of Cat's Creations, the Etsy store. And that she loves, talking on the pendulum. She has been known to talk through spirit boards and Ouija boards, and just all around be like a more positive entity. Has been known to like keep other entities in check or things like that. And in my experience, maybe that's why I'm not haunted, because my haunted dog probably like keeps people out. So thank you, but also like kind of boring. But yeah, so like when I was like, oh my god, this is perfect. She didn't know one that I was Irish or Scottish, and I was like, wait, this feels right. So I was like, yeah, let's definitely do it. How much would it cost for you to send her? She wasn't even listed on her storefront on Etsy yet, as an option to buy. She was like, oh, here, let me put her up as a listing real quick, because she's still running a business. She's selling these dolls. Kind of weird to think that you're like buying a entity though at that point, but you can think of it as like adoption process. There are adoption fees normally. So I ended up adopting, I guess, quote unquote, Eilish. And when she had arrived to me, she arrived in a box. She was very tightly like wrapped up in like cloth and bubble wrap, and there was some like, other like herbs or things like in the box, probably to like protect the spirit in her. When I opened that box and I like unwrapped her, my two friends, Andy and Dan, that were there at the time that I had opened her, can attest that like I almost fainted, because she had like this immense energy that you just had to get used to. But it was, whew, like I could feel it hit me, and I was like, all right, we're gonna go out and like do some stuff today. I didn't expect you to arrive today, but Eilish, feel free to like chill out here, get used to, my bedroom. This is your home now, blah 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 blah. And ever since then, it's just, been me and Eilish against the world. No, not actually, but I've kept her and have brought her everywhere with me ever since. She's always sitting on a shelf with her pendulum. It's a pendulum that I essentially assigned to only communicate with her for the most part. And I don't talk to her every single day. I can feel her presence there. There's sometimes that like I'll go throughout the day and just like get this thought that isn't even my thought, but just like this random like energy, like this feeling that I'm forgetting something, or like a reminder. And it's probably normally from her. She's been good about like creeping people out. And when she creeps someone out, normally I've come to find out that person isn't really a good person either. We've had a couple people come into my apartment or my home that I was living with a roommate, that brought like a friend to live on our couch for a little bit. And there is a mirror in our living room that we had told said friend, cover up the mirror if you're going to sleep out there like that. They're like, no, it's fine. They were very skeptical about, spiritual stuff and haunted things. We're like, okay, you've been warned. And they ended up kept saying that they were seeing like a woman at night in the mirror with like, a very long dress, which sounds like Ailish. They didn't have any other like specifications to them, and we've never had like really hauntings or like a lot of things to like really deal with having Ailish around. So I was like, that's probably Ailish like trying to fucking get them out of here, because then we found out that this person was lying to us about a bunch of stuff, and they were like overall not like really a great person. They had to earn my roommate's trust back, and it was like this whole thing. So yeah, but I mean, that's just my experience. Everyone owns random stuff that they probably didn't question, or things that they've thrifted, hand-me-downs, gifts from people you don't like fully know. And so like you get these objects, and sometimes, you keep them all your life and not realize that maybe there's an entity or an energy attached to it. Or maybe you find objects randomly when you move into a place. If you move in somewhere and you find like a fucking like creepy ass looking teddy bear, and girl, get rid of that attic. Burn the attic. Set that shit on fire. Okay? Don't trust anything. But now that we've kind of set up where we're going with all of this, what are haunted objects exactly? What qualifies as haunted objects? What are famous haunted objects? How are haunted objects portrayed in media? And what are some psychological or scientific meanings behind haunted objects? Well, I got some articles just for that. So haunted objects are pretty easy to describe, right? They're going to be objects or, just like things that cause paranormal activity. They are the source of it. They are going to be objects that have like normally an entity attached to it because there's emotional or trauma attached to the object. Being someone of LGBT community and gay, a lot of us gay people attach ourselves to things very early on in life, like objects or just, places or things that made us feel safe when we weren't safe in certain environments growing up, or when we didn't feel safe, even if we were. So these objects could be tied to like people, could be tied to a specific event. They could be tied to a location's energy specifically. And some of these most famous haunted objects around the world are going to be ones that have been, making skeptics and people scratch their head since the dawn of time, or since at least they've been discovered. And a lot of them have also gotten their own movies. So let's talk about a few of them. The first one being the infamous Annabelle doll. So the infamous Annabelle doll, or just the Annabelle doll, is inside the Warren's Occult Museum. And for anyone who don't know, Ed and Lorraine Warren are famous paranormal investigators. They were studiers of demonology. Lorraine Warren was a medium and psychic. And they, went to places to figure out if it was actually haunted, if there were actually demonic, presences there that they were investigating. And if there were objects from that place that were tied to those hauntings, they actually took those objects into their own home and put it into a room where nobody else was allowed to enter, that they normally blessed the room pretty regularly. I can't remember like their time frame on how they did stuff. And they would also, keep certain objects in different cases that would keep any entity attached to it locked away due to them being dangerous. The story of the Annabelle doll goes, originally, a woman named Donna, or a college student named Donna, received the doll as a gift from her mother, who purchased it as an antique. Over time, Donna and her roommate noticed like that the doll had a tendency to move, be it from location through the apartments or just like different positions. And after they started realizing it, things escalated. Donna would, from what she claimed or what she experienced, found notes reading help in the apartment. One night even came home to Annabelle repositioned and covered in a red substance. And that's when she decided to contact a medium. Sure-footed in the answer, the medium told the girls that the doll was inhabited by a spirit of someone who was killed in their building. But however, when Donna's friend Lou voiced his concerns that something more sinister was happening, the story suddenly escalates. Apparently, Annabelle attacked and killed Lou when he got up to investigate noises while hanging out at the girl's apartment one night. And the girls contacted the Warrens via a priest who decided the doll contained a demon. And when exorcisms failed to do what they needed to do to get rid of the demon, the Warrens agreed to take the doll on themselves. And there's been multiple films about this doll because of how scary it is, in the sense of like its experiences. There's a bunch of different like lore and things with the doll that could have been caused by the doll as well. There was like a whole thing on social media like a year or two ago that like Annabelle went missing. Now, I don't think that was true. I'm pretty sure if you fact check that, Annabelle was on tour, but like it was like a whole thing. But Annabelle is pretty creepy. And before we move on to the next object, why are dolls so creepy? Let's get a little scientific and factual here. According to this article from front page gcsu.edu, they talk about, why are dolls creepy, and GCSU psych faculty conjure explanations. So they essentially have their psychological department of science bring up explanations for why dolls inhibit fear in a lot of people, and then that could be the reason that people tend to think that dolls are haunted or have experiences with dolls when it comes to the supernatural. Associate Professor of Psychology Dr. Stephanie Jett says screenwriters who choose dolls as their film subjects may be tapping into a phenomenon known as Uncanny Valley. As explained in a 2023 Psychological Today article, the Uncanny Valley hypothesis states that artificial characters and objects that are almost, but not fully, human-like will trigger a deep sense of unease. The term Uncanny Valley originates from the 1970 article published by Japanese robotics professor Masahiro Mori, who said humans would show positive feelings toward a human-like robot up to a certain realism point. Mori coined the phenomenon Bukimi no Tani Gensho, later translated to English as uncanny valley. Think of the uncanny valley effect on a graph with humanness of an object on the horizontal axis and affinity for the object on the vertical axis. As the humanness rises to around 70%, people's affinity and comfort increase as well. But at around 80%, affinity bottoms out. When approaching 90 to 100% humanness, affinity spikes again, forming a valley on the graph. Meaning, essentially, there's a point where an object is almost human-like, but not enough, that causes people this guttural, like, fear feeling. There is a theory that our brains recognize this as part of an evolutionary, like, danger sense, that we have grown and there were things in the past that hunted humans or our ancestors that were almost human-like, and that causes our brain to essentially trigger when we run into something of the uncanny valley. Now that poses a whole different question of, like, what the fuck was happening to our ancestors and what was, like, being done to us back then that caused this, effect in our brain to activate, and what were those things that were almost human-like back then. That's a different episode. But there are the psychological explanations that cause this uncanny valley effect now that we know, and that could be the reason why people think dolls are haunted. There are some other factors, like environmental, psychological factors, that we will talk about here in a moment. But if dolls cause this uncanny valley effect, that doesn't explain the other haunted objects. The next famous haunted object, being the Hope Diamond, is a fucking diamond. It looks nothing like a person, right? This is in Washington, D.C. is where it's located. It's about 45 carats. It's has a violet color to it, and it's possibly haunted. According to this article on Photos.com for travel, of the 7 cursed objects around the world guaranteed to ruin your life, quote unquote, it's one of the most famous diamonds in the world, so maybe this isn't super surprising. Although many have speculated that reports of a curse or simple efforts to increase the object's air of mystery, let's talk about the story. In its earliest form, the diamond, which was most likely cut from a mine in India, is said to have been stolen from a statue. The thief was subjected to an extremely unfortunate death. This kicked off what seemed to be a string of upsetting fates for many individuals who owned or even touched it over the years. Jacques Colette died by suicide. Princess de Lamballe was killed in a massacre in the French Revolution. And merchant Jean Le Tavernier, I don't know how to pronounce these names, was mauled by wild dogs, just to name a few. Now, recently, or not recently, but back in 1958, Harry Winston donated the diamond to the Smithsonian. And as far as we're aware, the alleged curse has ended because it's not in the possession of anyone. So, string of coincidental deaths, but everyone owned the diamond? I don't know. But there is another object, though, that is also in a museum um, that also caused the owner's death. And that's the goddess of death statue, aka the woman from Lem. This is currently located in the Royal Scottish Museum, according to this article. And the object is really hard to explain. It's giving dildo, but also womanly figure. I think it's supposed to be a statue that represents the sexual and fertility aspects of woman and possibly man. And I went to art school for like a year and a half and took art history and stuff. So kind of qualified, not really. So I don't know. But the artifact was crafted around 3500 BC and it was found in Cyprus in 1878. And of the families it belonged to over the generations, each one was torn apart by death. Within 6 years of ownership, all 7 members of the first family had perished. Once the second owner, Ivor Manucci, acquired it, death came for him and his family after only 4 years. The statue then vanished for a while, and the new third family eventually laid claim to it, where several members of the family then died. The remaining 2 members of that family donated the artifact to the Royal Scottish Museum. So, objects just kind of going around and killing people, it looks like. Crazy. So, now, another famous and very infamous haunted object is the Dybbuk Box. Now, you might know it because of the show Ghost Adventures, featuring Zach Baggins, our man. If anyone knows how absolutely wild and funny that show was, you understand why I'm getting excited about this. The Dybbuk Box was attained by Zach Baggin in 2017, and he has it in his haunted museum, which is kind of similar to like the Warrens Museum, but it's more like he just puts possessed objects in there. I don't think that he does a whole lot to keep things protected. He does have the Dybbuk Box, though, in a glass case in the museum, surrounded by some holy symbols. This well-known wine box is allegedly possessed by a Dybbuk, which, in Jewish mythology, is a malicious and possessing demon. This was actually featured in another film, so like Annabelle has a bunch of movies. This is a 2012 film, horror film called The Possession. The Possession is a Hollywood horror film featuring a Dybbuk box produced by Sam Raimi and based on a 2004 LA Time article about a haunted wine cabinet. There's been other low-budget films featuring Dybbuk boxes, but that was the most famous Hollywood film. The Possession gained attention when it was auctioned on, the Dybbuk box, or this item, gained attention when it was auctioned on eBay in 2001 by a man who claims he bought it at an estate sale and its original owner was a survivor of the Holocaust. Immediately, no. Put that shit in a museum. Don't touch it. You're going to tell me that a survivor from the one of the worst events in our history, world history, is trying to sell his estate and the stuff in it? I ain't touching any of that shit. What? Well, the man reported encountering strange activity occurring when the box was around, including horrific nightmares. The object was made even more famous in 2018 when singer Post Malone touched it on an episode of Ghost Adventures and has reportedly been dealing with the consequences ever since. So, I mean, the lore of objects and how everyone interprets it really creates that, you know, sense of unease whenever someone's around it. That could be a psychological factor going into haunted objects. You know, psychologically and physiological factors rather than supernatural entities could explain some of these haunted objects that we just talked about. Common causes for sensations of like dread, hallucination, or like moving objects could be infrasound or low frequency sound, electromagnetic fields. It could be toxic mold or carbon monoxide poisoning that's like seeped into the object, especially with them being so old. Um, or psychological suggestion, mass psychological suggestion of people having experiences with these objects and then these stories spreading creates this already known fear of an object that could make you not think that it's just a regular object, right? You're already going in with this belief and this fear that then creates these other factors. One of the biggest factors that science believes for like places or things or objects that cause a lot of like neurological hallucinations is air quality and toxic mold. Exposure to molds like Stachybotrys chartarum, I have it like pulled up here in an article, can cause neurological impairment, irrational anger, and fear. Poor air quality can also lead to hallucinations and paranoia. So imagine you have an old dress that's quote unquote haunted that you found at an estate sale from someone that has kept it in their musty closet for decades. There's something on that dress, dude. But who knows? I'm just here creating this possibility of what if? And it is your job to tell me if you think it's true or not. You know, when we look at the power of critical thinking and things like that with people that experience sleep paralysis, hallucinations, and, you know, other forms of like random blindness due to migraines, things like that, not everyone turns to ghosts. They do think about the health reasons behind it. But ghosts and people that have experienced the supernatural, even the people that have experienced the supernatural and aren't talking about it, that's going to be their first thought is, could there be a supernatural explanation for this? Because I don't want to believe that I'm unhealthy. According to Science News Today, or Science News Explores article for science surrounding ghosts with critical thinking, Robin Andrews is a psychology student at the University of South Wales in Treforest. And she wondered if people with strong critical thinking skills might be less likely to believe in the paranormal. I have a lot of critical thinking skills and strong critical thinking skills, but I still believe in the paranormal. That could just be because I don't believe that everything is so mundane. If so, life would be so boring. I 100% believe that there is stuff out there. I am a believer, but I'm trying to stay neutral when talking about this stuff to y'all because I want you to decide. But Robin Andrews and her mentor, psychologist Philip Tyson, recruited 687 students for a study about their paranormal beliefs. The students majored in a wide range of different fields. Each was asked how strongly he or she agreed with statements such as, is it possible to communicate with the dead? Or, your mind or soul can leave your body and travel. The research team also looked at students' grades on a recent assignment. Students with higher grades tended to have lower levels of paranormal belief, this study found. Students in a the physical sciences, engineering, or math tended not to believe as strongly as those studying the arts. This trend also has been seen in research by others. But what bias happened during that study as well? How many students at their specific college and University of South Wales were studying that at that time? How many students were art? How many students were, math, science, and engineers? Did they take into account the outliers of the math, science, and engineers of this study to show, that some of them did believe in the paranormal? Was it an equal split? How randomly chosen was it? There's a bunch of different things in this article that doesn't explain, the bias that could be surrounding it, but that's okay. The final thing when it comes to some sciences with the paranormal is that we are emotional beings, most of us overall. And according to an academic study, academicstudiespress.com, one of their blog posts and studies, and they have a bunch of cited material from different articles from 1980s and 1990s. We are programmed to respond emotionally to our physical surroundings. This blog is specifically about how places creep us out, but it could be used for haunted objects as well. This part of the article says, it is well established that the environmental preferences of animals are under genetic control. Quoted from Alcock, 1993. And to some extent, this appears to be true for humans as well. Research by environmental psychologists has confirmed that the most attractive natural environments contain things such as running water and open meadows surrounded by woods. The very features that would have been beneficial for survival of early humans, says Kaplan in 1987. In other words, people who were drawn to the right places did better than those who were not. And over time, their genes were favored over those of individuals who spent too much time in sparser, more barren landscapes. Our love of such spaces shows up everywhere, and universally, children love playing in enclosed spaces such as cardboard boxes, tree houses, and in bushes or other dense vegetation where they feel hidden. The concepts of prospect and refuge may help explain the most magical quality of the feelings evoked by memories of favorite childhood hiding places and their richness of details that can often be recalled about them decades later. Similarly, diners and restaurants usually prefer to occupy tables in corners or nooks, especially when these locations allow them to sit with their backs against the wall, and they will usually only settle for tables in the center of the room when all of the more desirable seats have been taken. Scary places may also lack what environmental psychologists refer to as legibility. Legibility reflects the ease with which a place can be recognized, organized into a pattern, and recalled. In other words, a place that we can wander around in without getting lost. So, this kind of dives into that same theory of our ancestors with the uncanny valley that I had talked about earlier, but with locations, and we're programmed to emotionally respond to undesirable locations or locations that we can't recognize, especially if they're not positive looking, not sunny, not surrounded by favorable things. This could relate back to objects as well. If we see objects in those locations, or if we get objects from those locations, we're already going to have this sense of like unease from them. Certain objects, like the uncanny valley theory says, if they look too human, creates this unease in us. And that's where our psychological and more imaginative part of our brain starts to create this paranormal atmosphere around objects that might not be haunted at all. But who am I to say? You know, I've always had emotional ties to some of my objects, you know, in my home, different figures and things like that. Certain objects are just things that I've always been attached to because they're just stuff that my friends have gotten me. There are things that are gay representation. So that emotional factor into the objects create this energy around them. And then with all this other psychological stuff, those objects could be haunted. But the neurodivergency part of me also comes in and asks, why did that object move? A lot of neurodivergent people are very hyper aware of their surroundings. And if objects are moving by themselves in my house, I fucking know, dude. Like, my room might be a little messy, but it's a controlled messiness that I know where things are. Like, girl, if I come into my room and there's something on the floor that I know wasn't there the morning of, what the fuck? My door is always closed, so my cat's not allowed in my room. So, is that object on the floor haunted or something else in my room haunted? But, you know, with all that being said, just be careful when you're thrifting for objects or gifts or just things to have in your house. Mirrors, dolls, jewelry, and furniture are normally going to be the objects that are going to be very most common for these hauntings, right? A lot of random objects that like carry things like that Dybbuk box, or mirrors that are like dark, that have like a more black tint to them, can cause bad energy. But who am I to say? If you're a skeptic out there, it's your job to determine what's real and what's not. But if you're a believer, hey, maybe I'm confirming some stuff for you. Either way, I went looking for people who claim to have a haunted object on Reddit. So Reddit, can you prove us right or wrong? Let's see. So I did a little bit better due diligence than my Faye episode and got all my stuff pulled up in my tabs. I haven't exited out of anything, and I read a little bit further into some of these stories to make sure that I picked out some good ones for us to kind of dive into. So this first story, I think I have 2 haunted objects in my house, and I am unsure what I should do about it. The 2 objects in question are a little metal carousel looking thing, and a teddy bear that's in a glass box with 2 crosses on either side of them. On either side of it. These are some objects owned by my great-grandmother. When I was 9, I asked my mom where the teddy bear was from. She said it was from my great-grandmother, which I assume she was very close to because I'm named after her. I asked because when I saw the object or got close to it, I would start to feel like I had trouble breathing, even still to this day. According to my mother, my great-grandmother owned 3 fancy coats, and after she died from some type of cancer, my grandmother had made them into 3 teddy bears. One was given to my mom and the other 2 to my mom's cousins. My mom has since kept the bear and placed it in a glass case with crosses on both sides, which seems extremely odd. Years later, when I was 12, the music box, the carousel, kept going off in the middle of the night in my room. I would get these horrible dreams and the music box would be playing in my dreams. When I woke up, it would be playing in real life. It scared me so bad, I convinced my brother to let me sleep with him. After around 2 months of it going off every night continuously, it stopped. Ever since then, I forgot about it, including the bear. Now I'm 14 and I had a dream with these two items in the dream. So I finally just asked my mom about the bear and music box again, and I got retold the story of who they belonged to before and all that stuff. So I asked my mom if she thought the bear was haunted since she kept it in a glass case, surrounded on both sides by crosses, in an empty room in the house that no one ever goes in. She got pissed. I don't know if I should experiment with these objects to see if they are legitimately haunted. Just move out. Emancipate yourself, get your mom to sign the letter and be like, girl, you have fun with those possessed objects. Peace. Get a job at McDonald's. You're 14, right? So, OP, I think you should just not experiment with them. Why are we experimenting with things? Does anyone else get pissed off when they see like posts online of, oh, scientists unearthed 2,000-year-old, casket from blah, 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 blah. Like, leave it there, bitch. Leave it the fuck alone. It was put there for a reason. Do not be touching stuff that was put there by someone else from 2,000 years ago. What? This is how we bring bad juju into the world. Leave it alone. Let the spirits rest. Just like keep it out, Like claps if you agree. Like exactly. Yes. Thank you. I appreciate it. Moving on to the next story. Is this object cursed or haunted? Question. Little wooden doll / figurine I bought at a flea market in my childhood in the Netherlands, moved from inside a closed glass cabinet in a closed room next to my bedroom to the floor of my bedroom. I was thinking maybe it's a sign of good luck. Put it in my purse, went to watch the new Pixar movie Hoppers, and while crossing the road on my bike was nearly hit by a motorcycle. I got scared and threw it in the trash at the cinema, but felt guilty, took it out, washed it in the sink, took it back home. What do I do? This is my first time experiencing an object moving on its own. How do I store it so it's not angry? Or what do I do with it? Does anyone know what kind of doll this is? I'm not sure if it's Dutch. It could also be Indonesian because a lot of the stuff from our former colony ended up at flea markets, or Surinamese. Same reason. I'm not sure. Could it have randomly become cursed after 20 years? And it looks like a doll, wooden doll in a red coat thing. I'm not sure. Well, my thing is, first off, don't throw away haunted objects out of fear right away. You need to do something with it specifically so that it doesn't come back and get you. Second, the way that they wrote in this story, what do I do? This is my first time experiencing a haunted object. Reminds me of first time being haunted, kind of nervous, And third, not to like be that person, but this looks like a wooden butt plug. But it's definitely like, it's like a small wooden, it kind of reminds me of a nesting doll, but instead of like it being fully round, it has like a top head part and then a body part and then like a flared base to be able to like stand on. So yeah, no, OP, I don't know if it's cursed or haunted. Not enough evidence to say if this was just coincidental actions happening to you, but I would say probably find someone that can either take care of it for you or learn how to deal with haunted objects in a more delicate way. Moving on. Random toy appearance. I was deep cleaning my bedroom last night. I clean every day, but deep clean every 2 to 3 because I have a rabbit. Anyway, it is a pretty normal sized bedroom, pretty minimalist, so I know everything that's in it for the most part. I hovered along the edge of my bed on the side of my partner would sleep on, which is about a shoulder width wide to the wall, and out pops this guy. This guy. Oh, were they vacuuming? Hold on, pause. I hoovered along the edge of my bed on the side my partner would sleep. This definitely is probably someone that is not American. So I don't understand the lingo. I've never heard someone say hoovered as a way to vacuum before. So I was so confused. We're going to restart the story just like super quick. I was deep cleaning my bedroom last night. I clean every day, but deep clean every 2 to 3 because I have a rabbit. It is a normal sized bedroom, pretty minimalist, so I know everything that's in it. I vacuumed along the edge of my bed on the side of my partner would sleep on, which is about a shoulder width wide to the wall. And out pops this guy, which is a brown bear with a red bow, probably the size of like the palm of your hand. The bed is ottoman, so there is no under the bed. Now I have a 5-year-old, but I swear I know every single toy she has, and this isn't one of them. Now I wouldn't be as spooked, but 4 weeks ago, I got this tattoo. She has a teddy bear tattoo now that has her daughter's name and a bow on it, relating to her name and also my dog, or the tattoos related to her name and also like the daughter's name and her dog. I slept really poorly last night. I was so spooked, and it was only me and her in the house. I asked her this morning if this was one of her toys, and she says no. Very confused. So I then ask her if she's seen it before, and she says no, never. So now I'm spiraling and extremely baffled. When there's kids involved in haunted stuff, and I talked about this in my first episode, get rid of it. No, OP, I'm not sure if it could be many different reasons that bear is in your house. Now, you said you had a dog and a little girl. Maybe your dog was outside and brought it in. I don't know if your dog like free roams outside or if you walk your dog itself. Or maybe your little girl brought in a toy and you were asking her kind of like nervously if it was her, and maybe she felt that energy from you and then just lied to you because she didn't want to get in trouble for something that maybe she did or didn't do. Could be a couple reasons. But weird coincidence, I would say. And finally, we have 3 more stories, but this is a post. Did anyone ever have an experience with a haunted object, toy, or etc.? And there's 2 posts here that I'm going to read about this. I have a necklace that I believe is haunted, as does my great-grandma. Just for clarification, I've always hated necklaces, bracelets, rings, really any type of jewelry. One day, I got back home after being at the family graveyard to vent about the week, and I noticed a necklace on my bed. I figure it was my mom's, so I just put it on my doorknob so she could grab it. Wake up the next morning, and it's gone. I go to school and pull a notebook out of my backpack. It falls out of the notebook. I decided to just keep it. I started wearing it, and I still do to this day. Went to my great-grandma's, and she said it looked just like one of her mom's that was lost in the house when the pipelines blew up. So now I keep it. And if I ever lose it or drop it and can't find it, it somehow finds its way back to me. Sometimes I'll put it in my dresser, get a water from the fridge, come back, and it'll be on my bed. I know it should scare me, but it doesn't. I just think of it as my great-great-abuela, or bisa-bisa-abuela, great-great-grandmother, trying to get close to me. Definitely some connection to your family, OP, and if you're respecting the object, then there shouldn't be anything malicious coming from it. So good on you. Then the other post or comment from this string of posts. Long story, hopefully short. My little cousin had a stuffed wolf toy that her biological father gave to her shortly before flipping out and bailing out of her life forever. It was creepy, angry looking. She was a baby and didn't really like it, so we put it in my grandma's attic. Fast forward a few years and stuff steadily got crazy at grandma's house. It was small at first, but eventually escalated to the point of grandma and the rest of us hearing growls, shouts, knocks, always in threes. Scratches on walls and doors, typical demon stuff. But it was almost always in her room. I should point out that she never believed in that stuff until this all happened. She's got sage set up at almost every doorway in the house now. Anyway, we go to clean out the attic, and that freaking wolf was in the space right above her bed. We got rid of it, and everything stopped. We don't mess with demons, man, or whatever was up in that wretched thing. Yeah, I mean, good call getting rid of the object OP. Now, depending on the sage that you're using, be careful because certain sage practices are closed practices. And so if you're using straight up like white sage and not like a common garden sage, or like a bundle of different like applewood stuff, that might cause other issues. And we'll talk about that in a separate episode. But yeah, so those stories were great. But for our final story, this is going to be a longer one. This will probably finish out our episode as well. This is going to tie into our next episode. So, never shared publicly, but here's my demonic experience. You want real for ya? Careful what you seek. 1. I will make this clear up front. This is ultimately a testimony and what single-handedly turned me to Jesus. 2. Every word is 100% truth, and my memory as crystal clear as it can be. There is no part of this that is fuzzy to me because it was so traumatic I cannot nor want to forget it. 3. I am not here to force believers, convert anybody to Christianity, or embellish. And 4. I understand bringing religion into this will turn many away. That is fine. I see this as my personal truth and simply wish to share my experiences because there is a small chance this will protect others from horror they've never experienced. With those things out of the way, I present my experience with the demonic. Background. I grew up raised on Christian values, even attending Catholic private school for a couple of years. Despite this, I was a standout problem child and never really believed any of it at all. I found some of the stories from the Bible interesting, but overall detested going to church. Nobody in my family really forced religion on me. I just happened to be within a family that held mild Christian values. With that said, none of them were really devout Christians themselves. This is important because it should be understood that I was quite aware of Christian beliefs, but never actually took them as truth. Let's jump forward now to my teenage years where this all began. At the age of 12, I was engaged with all things mystical and mysterious. I read books and browsed websites on everything between ancient aliens, conspiracy, ghosts, mediums, witchcraft, Illuminati, and the mnemonic. This was around 2003, 2004. So just past the turn of the millennium, all these things were of great interest to me, but I had no actual evidence or reason to believe any of it. It wasn't until my family had made the decision to move that these things became more viable. My parents had locked in on a house they thought was perfect for us and were close to closing the deal. My mother wanted her mother, my grandmother, to come approve of it first. While I ran around the empty rooms trying to decide where I would have my bedroom, my mother showed my grandmother around. After the tour was given, my grandmother felt uneasy about the house, specifically the second floor. She didn't like the way it was set up and worried what would happen if there was a fire while me and my siblings were up there. This wasn't enough reason to deter my mother, though. After they checked over the potential new home, we proceeded to head back to the car. While on the drive, my mother mentioned to my grandma how she was weirded out because she could have sworn she saw a little girl staring at her from the second floor window. This led my parents to investigating the history of this house, and they had found, to their amazement, that there was, in fact, a fire on the second floor of this house many years prior that a young girl had perished in the flames. With that said, that strange coincidence was not enough to stop them from trying to buy the house. It was actually the fact that, upon inspection, there was found to be a roach infestation, and my mother would not have any part of that. This led us to finding our actual new home in another nearby town. This house was approved of much quicker and had the okay of my grandmother as well. So a couple busy days go by and we are pretty much all moved in and set at our new home. This is when we get a knock on our door. Turns out it was a woman who previously lived there who sold us the house. She wanted to pass a message on to us. The message being that her mother had died in the house and that she would occasionally appear, but that we shouldn't worry because she was friendly and was just attached to the house. We will keep this on the back burner for now. Cut to a few weeks later, I had made a new best friend who lived right down the street from me. My house number was 112, and his was 12. I thought that was pretty cool, but no special meaning there. It wasn't long after that I became close with his family, and they in turn became close to my parents. We would regularly visit each other's homes for get-togethers. The first get-together we had, my friend's parents asked mine about the move, where my parents filled them in on the details. This is where things got a little strange. To our surprise, my friend's family actually lived in the house we were looking at prior for a good decade, where they proceeded to say they moved because that house was incredibly haunted. They said there was 2 different ghosts in the house, one of which was a young girl and the other a malevolent old man. This shocked my family. So far intuition was on point. My friend had 3 older brothers, 2 younger brothers, and 2 younger sisters, one of whom they adopted. They also ran a daycare out of their house, so it was quite packed on the daily, LOL. Each of the older brothers had traumatizing hauntings happen to them in that house. The oldest brother, who was 21 at the time, still wouldn't sleep with the lights off because of it. This was the first point in my life where I seen multiple people confirming and agreeing upon spiritual activities in a real capacity. Now let's jump forward to about the age of 14, so about 2 years later. Following my same interests, I was fascinated with the ideas of ghosts and spirits. I wanted nothing more than to interact with them in some way or another. But despite the past mentionings, I myself hadn't seen one single shred of their existence. It was frustrating. I tried all manners of contact, bought crystal balls, stared into mirrors in the dark, looked into black ink, researched Etienne, literally everything under the sun, but nothing would work. That is until I opened a Ouija board on my 15th Christmas. If there is one message to take from this entire thing, it is, I tell you from the bottom of my soul, do not engage with a Ouija board, period. I didn't immediately use it, but one day my friend and I were chilling per usual, and I had remembered the new Ouija board I had gotten for Christmas. I asked him if he wanted to use it with me, and he hesitantly said yes. I made him go down into the basement with me because where else would be the perfect place to use it? I had just opened the box and placed the board on the table when my friend took it out on me. I mocked him and told him, "I'm going to do it myself then." I placed the little piece on the board, the planchette, and proceeded to ask it questions, but to no avail. Nothing. I was extremely disappointed. I thought for sure this was going to be it, but no. I put it back in the box, brought it upstairs, and that was that. Or so I thought. Boy, was I wrong. As wrong could be. Immediately over the next couple of days, I started experiencing things that were unusual. Simple things at first, like lights being funny, my dogs acting strange, objects and doors moving. This, however, was spectacular to me. I had no fear whatsoever. If anything, I was extremely excited and more into the occult than ever. I thought, this is it. What I've been waiting for, paranormal activity. These types of things continued for the next couple of years steadily. Then it finally happened. I saw my first ghost ever. I was 16 at this point and had been making my way from the kitchen through the dining room towards the living room. While I was gapping between the kitchen and dining room, I saw what I thought was my mother walking towards the kitchen from the connecting hallway. I took note in my peripheral of her pink dress, which threw me off a bit because my mother normally doesn't wear such things. It wasn't until I made my way through the dining room to the living room where I saw my mother and father sitting on the couch watching a movie. This instantly made me take 5 because I realized my mother not only was not wearing a pink dress, but was not in the hallway going to the kitchen. I proclaimed to my parents instantly of the shock and surprise I was in, but they straight shrugged it off and continued with the movie. I didn't press the issue because I was now elated with the fact I had actually seen a ghost, and I had instantly presumed it to be the prior owner's deceased mother. I would go on to look at her as a guardian spirit of the house, so to speak, though I never did see her again. This event was ultimately a bad thing because it put me more at ease with the idea of communication with the dead. I took her spirit as an example of what all spiritual things would be like, which pushed me further into looking for such things. However, the next 2 years, things progressed for the worse. I developed insomnia. There would be random spots in the house that would make your blood run cold. Doors would knock over and over. Things would be thrown out of the closets and off dressers and shelves. One of the more creepier occurrences would be electronics acting without electricity. Dolls would speak. There recorded sounds on cue without batteries. Lights would go on and off repeatedly. I've even had TVs go white static and start blasting max volume. I would unplug them and it would stay on and go louder. This scared the straight shit out of me. These weren't things where I could question other possibilities. These things were seen as nothing other than what they were: impossible. There was one night in particular where it clicked and the fear had taken permanently a hold of me. I had recently, at the time, gotten to the Harry Potter books. I was sitting on the couch in my basement, which is now redone as a TV room. I had one of those little bendy lamps used for reading books as my only illumination. I was thinking to myself how great these books are and how I thought it was funny people at the time thought they were for the devil. I shit you not, as I'm in this thought process, the light bulb explodes, projecting the glass shards at me. Luckily, no harm done. But I instantly hopped up in fear and ran out of my basement to escape the dark. I flew up the basement stairs where dolls started going off. The fear jolted in me. I sprinted even faster and finally opened the basement door and reached for the hallway light switch in front of me, flicking it as quick as I could. Again, I shit you not, as soon as I did, the hallway bulb exploded. At this point, I'm thinking, no fucking way is this happening right now. This happened 2 more times again in the living room, and once more on the 2nd floor, once I had made my way up those stairs. 4 light bulbs exploded in total. Now again, I am quite rational despite these things. I am aware this could be a very coincidental electrical wiring problem, but everything that ultimately happened says otherwise. I made it to my bedroom on the second floor where things normaled out and I finally had light. It was at this point in life where these experiences were taking a toll on me, really ramping up my insomnia. I was in constant fear while at home due to these things happening left and right. Some of the things so common I barely batted a lash at them. Now before we get to the big one, I want to give just a few more descriptions of everyday occurrences at this point. While laying it in bed, I would do everything in my power to avoid looking at my closet, which had a nasty habit of opening wide, so I would be gazing straight into a dark void. And before you say draft, I might add, I would lock/blockade it regularly. No matter what I did, this freaking door would push itself wide open, moving whatever blocked it right out of the way. I got so bad, I tried bargaining with it, telling it it was free to do what it wanted as long as it wouldn't open on me while I was trying to sleep. Not every night, but quite a few of them, I would feel things crawling beside me onto my bed. The last occurrence that I would see all the time affected other people due to my sleeping problems. I was always the last one to fall asleep. I witnessed multiple times people's arms being raised in their sleep like they were reaching for the sky. There was a day when I had a cousin and two friends crashing over, and I watched as one by one their arms were rising in the air. It made me feel like whatever this was taunting me, showing me that it could do whatever it wanted to whoever. The real kicker is when I was sleeping on an air mattress in my younger brother's room. I did this because at this point I was so terrified to sleep alone, I needed to be near somebody to feel somewhat safe. As I was dozing off, I watched my little brother's arms raise into the air. The only difference is this time he actually woke up while it was happening. I watched him groggily realize what was happening to him, and he jumped up to his feet, turned, and ran into the freaking wall out of terror and panic. I legit started laughing because I had never seen anything so absurd and shocking in my entire life. The way his feet moved like an old cartoon, like he was Sonic the Hedgehog. The way the blankets jumbled beneath his scurrying feet, and the sheer speed at which he hopped up and darted into the wall. Safe to say, both my brother nor I got any sleep that night. I'd grown quite brave at this point because these things were so regular and common, I simply just became used to it. I was able to sleep solo once again. So there I am, lying down on the couch against the furthest back wall of my basement. I had 3 dogs, one of which was a little white chihuahua named Baby. She was the most timid, docile, scaredy cat of a dog that you could imagine. I just turned off the lights and popped onto my back, where my little baby jumped up to sleep on my chest like she always does. This is where the single most terrifying thing in my life happened. Baby instantly goes to alert and stand up growling into the darkness. Her fur is raised and her fangs are bared. I can immediately perceive that this little dog is trying to defend me from something despite her tiny stature. This puts me on full alert. Next thing I know, she cowers. Her tail goes between her legs and she whimpers and flees. Before I can gauge what's happening, my arms were pinned straight down to my side and my back was forced straight down onto the couch. While forced down, it feels as if I was pushed 5 feet through the couch, like my soul was straight pushed out of my body. I was so consumed by fear that there wasn't a single thought in my head other than static and panic. It seemed like forever, but in reality, it was probably 10 seconds. As soon as this force let go of me, I hopped straight up in my undies and darted through the darkness towards the stairs. This is the part I want to make crystal clear because this right here is the part you never want to experience. Those who think the paranormal and ghosts are cool have not experienced this sensation I'm about to describe. I tell you, I felt a tangible hatred that was unlike anything I ever felt. It was the feeling of something that hated every fiber of your being and wanted nothing more than to destroy every last bit of you in the most malevolent way possible. It was inhuman sensation. It was in this moment I understood hell is real, and this was something from there. There was no doubt in my mind. It was a sense of knowing absolutely. It was the predator and you were the prey. I scrambled I scrambled room to room in my house, just like before. Every light bulb was shattering. I could not escape the darkness. I made it to the second floor and burst into my parents' room screaming. I swear on everything they would not wake up. I shook them and yelled, nothing. I then ran to the only other person in the house at the time, my little brother. Same thing. He would not wake. It was like trying to shake somebody out of a coma. I tell you, and honestly, I was 18, considered myself a man at this point, and had loads of pride. Still, this did not stop me from hopping right into my brother's bed next to him, pulling the blanket over me. Now, you would think at this point, I was safe, right? Wrong. This thing repeated what it did in the basement. It took hold of my body over and over. I could feel my mind breaking, my soul dying right in my very body. After the 10th time, I was completely hopeless. I had almost given in to defeat, on the verge of being scared to death and demolished by demons. This is when I remembered something I heard many a time from my Christian upbringing. Pray to Jesus. I swear to you, my eternal soul, and all that I love and hold dear, the moment I cried out to Jesus, the shit stopped on the dime. 15 years have passed at this point, and I have not experienced a single thing mentioned ever again. I haven't even come close to getting the feeling that something paranormal is near. Every single bit of the experience vanished. For the next year straight, I started praying at night, spending at least 15 minutes per night before bed, going through all my prayers. However, that's not the complete end to this saga. The very next morning, I tried my best to explain to my parents what happened. I can't say that they fully believed me, but they at least listened enough to help me out. I thought about how it all seemed to start when I first used a Ouija board, which led me to doing a quick online search on how to dispose of such a thing, because I did not want that thing/portal anywhere near me again. It said online the only way to truly close it was to burn the Ouija board, so the same day my parents and I brought it out back to the fire pit. Now, I must say I was hasty here and left the bidding to my parents because I didn't even want to look at the thing or be near it anymore. Funny enough, it was years later I was regaling the events with my mother where she gave me a bit of surprising news. She proceeded to tell me that she did in fact believe me because that day, unbeknownst to me, the Ouija board would not burn. She expressed how she and my father doused it with gasoline and it still was unscathed. They ultimately threw it out in the trash can and watched the dump truck take it away. I figured that must have been good enough because, again, nothing ever came back. I like to imagine that it eventually got incinerated at the junkyard at some point. That's pretty much the end of that, but I can still provide one more after happening that I found quite coincidental. When I was speaking of my mother and father, it was really my mother and stepfather. I say this because when I finally told my blood father this ordeal, he went on to tell me all about how he was severely haunted in his youth, and similar to me, was a non-believer who happened to call out to Jesus for help. I can't say for certain, but this has led me to believe that there are in fact be some kind of hereditary thing going on here. Like I started out saying, I have not fabricated or embellished even one bit of this. I have pondered the thoughts of such things as mental disorders, but to that degree, I still have two things to go against that. Doctors have continually found my mental health to be fine. No matter what the case, I stopped forever on the drop of the dime the moment I called out to Jesus. There may be a few more things I'm blanking on at the moment because I have been writing this for the past 2 hours or so, and I'm getting to that point where my brain is fizzing. LOL. But I'm more than happy to take on and answer any questions you may have. And then there's some edits. Beware 3 a.m. Something about this was legit. Wasn't until 3:30 a.m. does it seem to die down. Can't honestly tell you why the 3 a.m. thing comes into effect, but there was always an extra intensity in that gap, which is the witching hour. There's some other edits, just them being thankful of the upvotes and the comments and interaction to the post, but that's about it. Whew, that was a long one, but I think that really, really ties in well with everything that we're talking about today. If this was indeed due to a Ouija board, Ouija boards are one of the most notorious objects to be a haunted object. And if you're going to be playing a Ouija board or use one, you need to know how to do it right, or things like this could happen. Now, if I was that person, would I have kept the Ouija board or thrown it away? I would have definitely gotten rid of it. I think I would have been present and watched it burn and get thrown away, though. I think my mind would have been more at ease than just trusting my parents to do it. Yeah, no thanks. So, with that being said, let's close out this episode. All right. Now, listeners, think about everything in your room right now. Where did it come from? Who owned it before you? And would you even know if something was attached to it? Just a little thought to build some spookiness to your day. But if you have ever had something like this happen to you, I need to hear it. I absolutely need to hear it. Haunted objects, and with Ouija boards being our next episode, or any other things paranormal, please email it to me at ghostedbutgay@gmail.com. That is GHOSTEDBUTGAY ghostedbutgay. And I just need to know your experiences. I just really need to know. I want to talk about them and post them on here. Read them. We've been doing a lot of Reddit stories with this stuff, but I want to really dive into listener experiences. So, if you have an experience that is related to any of the past episodes that we've already done and our next episode, the Ouija board, please let me know. With Ouija boards being notorious among all others, that's why we read that story last. Also, it was the longest story. The next episode will be about haunted objects again, but specifically on the Ouija board. And maybe we'll have a Ouija board answering some of our questions. Who knows? All right. Give me some feedback down below on comments for wherever you're listening to this podcast. Make sure to share with your friends, like, follow, all that good stuff. Eventually, the more listeners that we get, maybe we'll open up a Patreon to support the podcast for exclusive stuff, exclusive episodes, and other fun little things that I have in mind. And maybe like free merch, things like that. And I will also start making merch for the podcast that will be sold on my Fourth Wall store that I already have through my Twitch stream. Because we're going to be partnering with myself on my Twitch stream on episode 25 to do a live recording of the episode and Q&A to viewers. So if you're subscribed to me on Twitch and see Ghosted But Make It Gay merch on my Fourth Wall store and merch store, subscribers, I believe, get free shipping, but I'll have to double check. But I believe that is still the case. So yeah. But thank you guys. I love you all. And you all have a lovely, spooky evening.